Ever wonder why so many people regain weight after stopping a GLP-1? Up to 40% of the weight lost can come from lean muscle. This weakens the body, slows metabolism, and makes it easier to put the pounds back on, creating a cycle of dependency. Prolon's 5-day fasting mimicking diet offers a drug-free way to maintain results and support long-term metabolic health when paired with proper diet and exercise. In just 5 days, it activates fasting pathways to burn fat, protect muscle, and rejuvenate cells, all while letting you enjoy real food. Get 15% off plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe at prolonlife.com/Pandora promo. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. See site for details.
Welcome to True Crime Garage. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Nick, and with me as always, ladies and gentlemen, the lemonade and biscuits of true crime. Here is the captain.
Yeah, it's good to be seen. Good to see you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for telling a friend.
Today, we are still sipping on this fantastic double IPA, Graffiti Highway by Troegs. This one is sneaky, people, so watch your back. They mask the high alcohol content perfectly with a fruit-forward IPA. Tastes too good to be 9.5% ABV, so step lightly, friends. Garage grade 4.25 bottle caps out of 5. And let's give some thanks and praise to our good garage friends. First up, a shout to Hannah from Scranton, Pennsylvania.
And a big "we like your jib" and tall cans in the air goes to Caitlin in Princeton, Texas.
And let's go out west and give a cheers and a shout to Christy in Fresno, California. And last but certainly not least, also in Cali, we have Charlie from Benicia, California. Everyone we just mentioned, they went to truecrimegarage.com and helped us out with this week's beer fund. And for that, we thank you.
Yeah, BWRUN, beer run. If you're in the spooky season mood and you want to support the garage, go to truecrimegarage.com and check out our store page. And Colonel, that's enough of the business.
Yeah, check out the store page. It'll scare the hell out of you. All right, everybody gather around, grab a chair, grab a beer. Let's talk some true crime. As strange and just as out there as the Ed Gein story is, House of 1,000 Corpses weird, there is another guy from the same state, Wisconsin, down in Milwaukee, where after several police blunders, they eventually found a lot of similar trophy/necro hobby materials like they did at Ed Gein's House of Horrors. This is the Dahmer apartment of horrors,
located in Milwaukee.
From Martin Fido's The Chronicle of Crime, the big headline in his book says, Jeffrey Dahmer, Milwaukee Cannibal Monster. And it goes on to say, gay cannibal monster caught in Milwaukee, parts of his 17 victims stored in his flat. And there's a picture of the Journal newspaper out of Milwaukee with the headline that reads, Body Parts Litter Apartment.
Yeah, every time I hear the name Jeffrey Dahmer, I think to myself, what was that smell?
Yeah, Fido writes of what finally led to the discovery of Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment. And anybody that's familiar with the story, and a lot of our listeners are here, because it's been told so many times, told in the garage. We've talked about it on Off the Record several times. But Fido writes here, despite the failure of Milwaukee's Finest, Dahmer had only 2 months and 4 more victims to go. So this is after they basically returned a victim to Jeffrey Dahmer. Fido writes, on July 23rd, Dahmer picked up 32-year-old Tracy Edwards, a heterosexual who was not willing to join in sex play or drink drugged coffee. But Dahmer got a handcuff on one of Edwards' wrists and used that and a knife to hold him prisoner for 4 terrifying hours. Edwards escaped when Dahmer's attention flagged. He stopped 2 policemen in a patrol car and asked them to release him from the handcuff. After hearing his story, they went back to Oxford Apartments to investigate this strange homosexual kidnapper. Dahmer offered the sullen explanation, quote, I just lost my job and I wanted to drink some effing beer, end quote. He resisted their attempts to come into his flat. An attempt to arrest him resulted in a struggle, which ended with Dahmer screaming on the floor. A thorough inspection of the flat uncovered. You know, it's a fine Englishman when he's referring to the apartment constantly as a flat.
Right.
Shout out to the late, great Martin Fido. I was a big fan of his work for many years. So a thorough inspection of the flat uncovered the following: a human head in the fridge, 3 heads.
Well, that's where you keep a severed head.
In the floor freezer. Well, apparently he keeps them in multiple spots.
Well, as long as they're the freezer.
A human heart in the fridge freezer compartment, a blue barrel jammed with body parts and bones, 2 skulls in a computer packaging box, 3 skulls and some bones in a filing cabinet, 2 skulls in a kettle, a penis and some hands in another kettle.
Well, this was such a blunder by law enforcement because it wasn't just that they released a victim back into the custody of Dahmer. But like I said, this neighbor, she called law enforcement multiple times, and she called the landlord multiple times because there was a funky smell coming.
Yeah, funky's probably pretty polite.
An understatement, right?
Yeah. Fido goes on to write, the Milwaukee cannibal's career was over and Dahmer was dragged away in custody, howling like a mad dog. He has a little small caption in here. So what's cool about this book is, and it's completely at Fido's discretion here, but some of the larger cases, you know, when you come across them, when you turn the page and it takes up 2 full pages, because this is one of those large coffee table style books. Dahmer takes up 2 full pages. Some of these other crimes, I will say to Fido, it's a little surprising that they only took up a portion. But again, he's covering 2 full centuries of true crime in this book. And the caption here that I wanted to get to, Captain, this discusses Dahmer and race. And Fido writes, while Milwaukee's policemen regrettable failure to take the complaints of black witnesses seriously may justify the race protest demonstrators led by the Reverend Jesse Jackson in the wake of the murders. The secondary suggestion that Dahmer himself was racially motivated seems ill-founded. Dahmer's victims break down into the following categories: 1 American Indian, 1 half Jewish Puerto Rican, 1 Hispanic, 1 Asian, 2 Caucasian, 11 Black or African American. This mix is very close to the demographic population of the poor districts of Milwaukee and Chicago, where Dahmer made his pickups. So it seems certain that he took his victims opportunistically at random. With all his faults, Jeff Dahmer is no racist, although he found the worst possible way of demonstrating his freedom from prejudice. So, in fact, what we kind of learn about Dahmer over the years was quite the opposite, wasn't it? He had an attraction to
Right.
African-American men. He was sexually attracted to African-American men. That was kind of his preference, it appears, and very much less has to do with some of these killers trying to target a certain race because they don't like them for whatever reason. Not here with this one. It appears his crimes were all sexually motivated, as disturbing and as bizarre as they were, all sexually motivated. And it appears to me he was attempting to get men that he was physically attracted to. And in some weird ways, wouldn't you say kind of emotionally attracted to them in Dahmer's weird way as well, back to his apartment to ultimately become his possession, not his companion, but his possession. He seemed to want to keep them forever.
Yeah, he almost wanted like a
playthings,
live sex dummy, and then or a live sex doll that he could control. But I think the lack of seriousness that the law enforcement took in this case was more so because they didn't want to deal with the homosexual community, as opposed to, well, we're not taking this serious because they're coming from minorities. I think it was more like, well, we don't want to get involved. This is a homosexual spat. And
well, right. Incorrect. In a way, homosexual would be minority as well, but I totally get what you're saying. And you're absolutely right. It was a different kind of prejudice as far as the Milwaukee police go. As you're saying, not so much against African Americans, more of I'm a beat cop. This appears to be some kind of
lover
gay spat that I don't understand, don't really want to get involved with. And that's, look, when you don't take the time to attempt to understand a situation, regardless of who's involved in it, you're not doing your job as a police officer. And in fact, horrifically so. In one of these cases, we know that the police sent the victim right back into the clutches of the killer.
Now, I would argue that anybody in that apartment complex that was calling law enforcement or calling anybody to, hey, something's going on here. Somebody needs to look into this. I mean, all I would have took was one call being answered by the landlord and doing a house inspection to go, oh shit, we need to call law enforcement.
We need to call a lot of people, right? We need to get.
This guy has a lot of freezers in here.
Who you gonna call? Because it seems like there would be everybody that you want to call. So, we had talked about Dahmer wanting to control his victims, keep them, make them his sex slaves or playthings. In Johnny's book, the Serial Killer Travel Guide Across America, there's a lot of very dark humor in the book, and he refers to this as bang zombies, which is, pretty grotesque term, but really does kind of sum up probably what Dahmer had, at least in his mind,
right,
of what he was attempting to do. And then from that book, the Serial Killer Travel Guide Across America, there's a stop. Just like we're stopping here in Milwaukee today, there's a stop there in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and they write Jeffrey Dahmer, a.k.a. the Milwaukee Monster, kills 17, span of activity from June 1978 to July 1991, stating, fun fact, Dahmer's favorite movies were The Exorcist Part 2, and The Exorcist Part 3.
And he's diverse.
Yeah, he was really into that franchise.
Yeah.
Johnny goes on to write, Milwaukee is also home to the apartment building where Dahmer committed his atrocities. While the building where Dahmer committed his horrific murders was torn down in 1992, the lot still sits empty today. They say if you listen closely, on a moonless night, you can hear the distant cries of those who suffered within its walls. Johnny goes on to write, Dahmer took his first life in the summer of 1978, a few weeks after he graduated high school. He picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks and brought him back to his house, ostensibly to drink beer, but the goal was to have sex. Hicks wasn't into that. When he tried to leave, Dahmer killed him by hitting him in the head with a 10-pound dumbbell. Sorry to go into the graphic nature of this, but we would later learn.
Right.
Because Jeffrey Dahmer later stated, and he spoke at length about some of his crimes with law enforcement, with documentarians, and his father. But Jeffrey Dahmer later stated regarding the Hicks murder that he struck Hicks twice from behind with a dumbbell as Hicks sat in a chair. When Stephen Hicks fell unconscious, Dahmer strangled him to death with the bar of the dumbbell, then stripped the clothes from Stephen's body. He says before exploring his chest with his hands and then masturbating as he stood over the corpse. Hours later, Jeffrey Dahmer dragged the lifeless body down to the basement. The following day, Dahmer dissected Hicks's body in that basement. He later buried the remains in a shallow grave in his backyard. Several weeks later, he unearthed the remains and pared the flesh from the bones. So paired, basically very intricately taking the flesh, removing it from the bones. He dissolved the flesh in acid before flushing the solution down the toilet. He crushed the bones with a sledgehammer and scattered them in the woodland behind the family home. Remember, he's still living at his parents' home at this time. His parents are completely on the outs at this time. He says that he threw Stephen Hicks's necklace and the knife that he used to dismember him from the Bath Road Bridge into the Cuyahoga River.
Do we have a better understanding of the dismemberment? Because a lot of times the killer will dismember the victim to dispose of them, but it doesn't seem like that was necessary in this case.
Well, to me, it feels like Dahmer had the privacy and a lot of time to put in the efforts to making sure that the victim was never found. Right. So in 1978, back then, there's not a lot of convictions without a body. There's not a lot of even murder charges when you have a no body case.
Right.
And unfortunately, with everything that we just went through, I mean, there's no body. He pretty much obliterated the entire body, and he had the time to do so. Keep in mind, too, one thing about Dahmer is he had some level of understanding with things like taxidermy and roadkill and dead animals.
Right. So maybe it was just maybe it was just a continuation of what he was doing with those animals.
Well, and I think that he had a level of know-how, too, that the first-time killer probably would not have had. So, example here would be he buries the body in a shallow grave in the backyard. And then several weeks later, he unearthed the remains to then remove the flesh, muscle, tissue from the bones. Okay, and then he's going to completely destroy the flesh, muscle tissue in one manner and then use a different method to destroy the bones. You can look at this in a couple different ways. Very likely two things are happening here. He is probably haunted by the body in the backyard, in the shallow grave, haunted in a sense of it could be easily found, right? The ground may appear to be disturbed. And we talked about this with several serial killers that we have covered in the past, where some of them say that, right after I killed this person, I just immediately expected to hear police sirens, that everybody knew what I had done. And it was only a matter of time before they came to get me, before they came to collect the evidence and lock me up and throw away the key. So he may have been haunted by the body in the backyard by that sense. He also probably may have known going into this that it's going to be far easier to commit this act of removing the flesh from the bone if I simply wait, right? The decomp starts to set in, the breaking down of the tissues and the cells is going to make this less of a tedious effort on my part. It's going to go much quicker. I hate to say it, Captain, but he did an excellent job of completely destroying and obliterating this body and the evidence. I mean, with the exception of maybe the knife in the victim's personal belonging necklace could be found in the Cuyahoga River, but that's no small river.
Right. And how far did it travel from his property?
And time is the killer of evidence, and water,
yeah,
a lot of times killer of evidence.
But it's also fascinating with these killers how there's so many similarities. Like you were talking about the isolation that Dahmer had for a time period in his family home, in his childhood home, but there's nobody there. They just left him alone. And you see those similarities in like Ed Gein, the isolation on the farm.
Yes, and very likely some level of mental illness. I hate to use that term because I feel like these guys, you don't want to lump them in with people that are clearly nonviolent people that don't have that have no desire to do any of the terrible stuff that we've just discussed today.
Yeah, but mental illness is a spectrum, right?
Right. It's an all kind of encompassing term, but this to me is mental illness. Be damned. This is mental disturbancy. Like this is a whole nother level here. And to put it in its simplest of forms, Jeff Dahmer did that for us, because later he says it wasn't just that, I desired to have sex with this man that I brought back to my home, and we're having drinks and we're getting along, we're hanging out, we're palling around. It wasn't just that he wasn't into what I was into. Part of his psychosis too is, as he put it to police, was, well, I killed Stephen Hicks because the guy wanted to leave and I didn't want him to.
Right.
And so in a way he's keeping him. And then you have to wonder with the bang zombies or whatever, whoever wants to call it, whatever. We've reviewed plenty of serial killers that mention things like slaves for the afterlife, or that my victims are forever my slaves or my property. And this seems and appears to be the first step, nay, giant leap toward that mindset.
Well, these individuals become monsters. We don't become monsters ourselves just because we show some sympathy to these killers that showed no sympathy to other humans and viewed humans as less than. And again, somebody could go, well, he was isolated, so he wanted to keep this individual there. But let's remember, this is an individual that didn't care about the life. It was more his wants and desires, and he's going to do anything to carry out those wants and desires.
Well, and the other thing too is he turned away from any other type of companionship, relationship, human interaction that he could have, that was available to him at the time. Now his mom was a bit of a train wreck herself. His dad was a bit checked out. There was a lot of problems between mom and dad, but he had a sibling. He had a brother that he could have attempted to make an emotional connection and have a good, solid relationship with. He knew people at school. There were people in his high school. There were people in his neighborhood. He didn't go to great lengths and efforts to have real, meaningful relationships with other people. He went to great lengths and efforts to attack,
possess,
sexually assault this poor young man, this victim.
Yeah, and because there's so much information about Jeffrey Dahmer, you see individuals that tried to reach out to him, try to look after Jeffrey in high school, in the Army, after the Army, in college, even at that apartment complex. There's individuals there that try to look after him, try to invite him to gatherings, or even try to set him up on dates.
The woman that alerted the police that something was going on, the woman that alerted the landlord that something was going on, she tried to befriend him, and seems like would have been an incredibly wonderful neighbor to have. So yeah, he turned his back on all of that. Yeah, he turned his back on so yeah, let's not feel an inch or an ounce of sadness for this man telling us later that he was very much alone.
Well, that's where I disagree. I think we can view these people with some sadness or sympathy, and that doesn't make us monsters in turn. That shows that we have humanity.
The court found Jeffrey Dahmer sane, surprisingly, guilty on 15 counts of murder and sentenced him to 15 life terms, totaling 957 years in prison. Jeffrey Dahmer was severely beaten by fellow inmate Christopher Scarver with a metal bar. Oddly enough, a metal bar very similar to how Dahmer killed his first known victim. A metal bar from the prison gym, and then died while incarcerated. Scarver claimed, quote, God told him to do it, end quote. All right, Captain. Trick or treat?
I'll start with trick.
I have a feeling you'll get this one for sure. I know it, in fact. What kind of ship has two mates but no captain?
I know nothing about ships.
A relationship. All right. Treat. These are not good. Well, the relationship one's pretty fitting for all the stuff we discussed about Dahmer. Mm-hmm. From the Serial Killer Travel Guide, here comes your treat. They say, if in Milwaukee, which I say I will certainly go to someday. In fact, a while back, the boys from Generation Y were talking to us about setting up some kind of event with both podcasts involved. And I kept saying, let's do Milwaukee. It's like the northern middle between Kansas City and Columbus. So I assume it's a great sports town, a great beer drinking town, of course. Anyway, the travel guide says, check out the Miller Brewery Tour. It's a 170-year-old factory with an awesome outdoor beer garden. What if I told you the biggest crime story of our time is happening right under our noses, and we're all witnesses? Introducing Lawless Planet, the new podcast from Wondery that exposes the dark underbelly of the climate crisis. From the Amazon rainforest to small-town America, host Zach Goldbaum uncovers shocking tales of murder, corporate cover-ups, and greed. You'll hear about the brave activist risking their lives for their beliefs, the corrupt tycoons destroying ecosystems for profit, and the ordinary people caught in the crossfire. This isn't some distant threat. It's happening right now. Each episode drops you into a battle for our planet's future. We're talking mysterious deaths, daring heist, and billion-dollar scams, all with the fate of our world hanging in the balance. This is Lawless Planet. Follow Lawless Planet on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcast. You can listen to new episodes early and ad-free right now by joining Wondery Plus in the Wondery app, Apple Podcast, or Spotify. If you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, no BS. Plans start at $15 a month at Mint. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. It's just that easy. Start saving money and get the same great quality wireless service that you are used to with Mint Mobile. People are saving $40, $50, $60 a month with Mint Mobile and getting the same great service. Ready to say yes to saying no? Make the switch at mintmobile.com/TCG. That's mintmobile.com/TCG. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 a month. Limited time New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details.
Ever wonder why so many people regain weight after stopping a GLP-1? Up to 40% of the weight lost can come from lean muscle. This weakens the body, slows metabolism, and makes it easier to put the pounds back on, creating a cycle of dependency. Prolon's 5-day fasting mimicking diet offers a drug-free way to maintain results and support long-term metabolic health when paired with proper diet and exercise. In just 5 days, it activates fasting pathways to burn fat, protect muscle, and rejuvenate cells, all while letting you enjoy real food. Get 15% off plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe at prolonlife.com/Pandora promo. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. See site for details.
All right, we are back, you ghosts and ghouls. Cheers, mates.
Cheers to you, Captain. Now this, for our next stop, our fourth stop, this is from another great Martin Fido book. This time he is paired up with Paul Begg, another fascinating gentleman. Paul Begg is acknowledged worldwide as one of the leading authorities on the Jack the Ripper mystery. He has worked in newspapers, television, and publishing. He has written extensively on Jack the Ripper. This is from American Justice, Great Crimes and Trials. For you old school followers of true crime television, this is American Justice, the TV series in book form. Stop number 4. Here we go, Captain. Norwood Park is neither part of the city of Chicago nor part of the city of Des Plaines. The city police departments are the two conurbations, have no jurisdiction over crimes committed here, and have to leave them to the county sheriff's department. In December 1978, the citizens of Norwood were not a little surprised to find the Des Plaines police staking out 8213 West Summerdale Avenue, home of nice Mr. Gacy, the fat and friendly building contractor who had lived there for 7 years. So heading out to Chicago,
Old Gacy.
Both Gein and Gacy are, as we said, if true crime were a town, they would be the talk of the town right now, with making headlines again, once again, both of them with Netflix and Peacock exploring their lives and their crimes and some of the stories about them.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed in the Ed Gein Monster series, so I'm looking forward to Peacock redeeming the true crime world with their biopic, if you will, of John Wayne Gacy.
And then we go back to the Chronicle of Crime, 1978. The headline here: Killer Clown Stuffed Boys Under His House. In the picture that they chose to include, that Fido included in the book here, I'll read the caption to you. It says, First Lady Rosalind Carter unwittingly shakes hands with America's worst mass murderer, John Wayne Gacy. And of course, it's a picture of the First Lady shaking hands with a serial killer, an infamous serial killer that we now know is responsible for 33 murders. From the Serial Killer Travel Guide Across America, we have Norwood Park, Illinois. John Wayne Gacy, a.k.a. the Killer Clown, kills 33 plus. Span of activity, January 1972 to December 1978. John Wayne Gacy, he was born on March 17th, 1942 in Chicago, Illinois. His father was an alcoholic who physically and verbally abused his son. Gacy married into a wealthy family and relocated with his lucky bride to Waterloo, Iowa. Gacy took over management of the family's Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant and was well known in the community as a good family man. And it goes on to say, at the time, he was a member of the local JCs, where he would provide fried chicken and insist on being called Colonel. Yeah. Thanks for including that. Well, it makes sense. If he was running the Kentucky Fried Chicken, he would want to be called Colonel.
Yeah.
Let the record reflect that I have never insisted that I be called Colonel. I just, they dubbed me that somehow. So when he's out in Waterloo, Iowa, right? John Wayne Gacy, he gets convicted in 1968 of a sodomy charge of a teenage boy in Waterloo, Iowa. He gets 10 years imprisonment for this. He served 18 months. Let me read from the travel guide here. It says, after serving 18 months in prison, Gacy was paroled in 1971 and moved back to the city of Chicago. That July, he remarried. So he got divorced. He remarries, but things didn't work out all that well as Gacy was charged with the attempted rape of a young man. The charges were dropped when the victim failed to appear in court. The marriage didn't last. Who would have saw that coming? Didn't last. Gacy's second wife divorced him due to her husband's moodiness and obsession with homosexual magazines.
Yeah, but also, if your partner is accused of something that you probably think they did, even though law enforcement can't prove it, probably time to move on.
Well, yes. And look, I think the travel guide there sort of only scratches the surface with what was going on.
Right. Because
we have more than just the pornography and things like that he's bringing into the house. So he's pushing back on his wife and the relationship and saying, you know, I don't really care about this marriage. I don't really care about this relationship. I'm going to come and go as I please. And his business is sort of taking, he's a contractor, but he owns his own businesses, and the businesses are taking off around this time. So he is coming and going as he pleases, and he's staying out very late. He's drinking a lot, and he's not much fun to be around. And then this is from Out of the Mouths of Serial Killers by Mary Brett. A bit of a caption here. It says, Gacy opened what he called a club in the basement of his home where he allowed teenage workers of his to socialize, play pool, and drink. Gacy was known to only socialize with the young males.
Yeah, but again, when we talk about these similarities, you go, there's people in society that were trying to have relationships with these individuals, and they were choosing the relationship that they were going to have with their world. And I think some of it, if you really start dissecting the minds of these killers, their obsession and drive for these sexual violent acts starts consuming their whole life. So every minute becomes about these obsessions. And so some people can go, well, there was isolation with Dahmer. Yeah, but he was still going out to clubs to be around a certain individual.
Bathhouses.
Which would have been his ideal type for a victim. And so same way with Gacy. Well, I'm going to have this hangout club for my victim type. It's really fascinating shit.
Yeah, exactly. And then as far as, you know, see, Gacy's the exact opposite though, right? Like Gacy is gregarious. He's fun to hang out with, or at least puts on a show
until he tries to kill you.
Well, and he's raising money for the Democratic Party. He's throwing parties at his house. He had bodies in the crawl space. And he's inviting like hundreds of people to these backyard summer parties, and hundreds of people are attending these parties.
Yeah.
He's successful. There were people in this community that said, you know what? This is a guy that you should aspire to be like. This is a guy that is successful. He's outgoing. He gives back to the community. He's offering jobs to many people. I mean, we talk about cubism with BTK and how he was able to fool his family and his community and church and where he worked. Gacy is that times 10. And he managed to get married twice to smart and in one case, well-to-do women. And I think what happened with him was once they got in a living situation, he could no longer keep up that image full time.
Right. The cubism. Yeah.
Yeah.
But also one of the things that all these serial killers that you've talked about so far have in common is smell.
There's a lot of stench involved.
A lot of stink. Something stinks here.
So this says, remember, he served that 18 months. And then it says he murdered his first victim in 1972, had murdered twice more by the end of 1975, and then murdered at least 30 victims after his divorce from his second wife. That divorce took place in 1976. And the travel guide goes on to say, investigators obtained a warrant to search Gacy's house. While searching his home, investigators entered the crawl space, and you said it. You said stink. You said stench. A rancid odor was quickly noticed. And then during that search, they found what belonged to a teenager who had disappeared, a ring that had belonged to a teenager that had been missing for a year. And then with that finding, investigators were able to obtain a second search warrant for Gacy's home because of this evidence. Ultimately, going off of memory here, Captain, it was the investigation into the disappearance of DePlain's teenager, Robert Peast, that led to Gacy's arrest that took place December 21st, 1978.
Well, I'm sure they show this in the Peacock dramatization of John Wayne Gacy, but many times law enforcement was in his house.
Mm-hmm.
And then openly asking him, what's that smell?
Yeah. So listen to this. We talked about the arrest on December 21st, 1978. And the travel guide says on December 22nd, 1978. So the next day, Gacy, realizing that the police were going to find out what he had been up to, he confessed to some of the murders. Later, we learned that 28 of those victims were buried in shallow graves under his house. He later explained to police, quote, there are 4 Johns, John the contractor, John the clown, and John the politician. The 4th John went by the name of Jack Hanley, who was the actual killer. I guess police decided to settle on arresting the John that was sitting in front of them.
Well, I think a fascinating angle if you want to research somebody like John Wayne Gacy is the angle because he was such a community driven individual, or at least one of his personalities were. And I guess you could make an argument that was it a split personality or was it just a side that he was choosing to show? But so many victims, were those victims just victims of his alone? Is it possible that some of the victims weren't just victims of Gacy, but Gacy and somebody else or multiple people? Because we do have that eyewitness that claims that got away. And it seems like, especially these serial killers that have a high body count, you go, there's normally somebody that got away. But I believe his eyewitness account was that there was more than one person there.
Yeah, and I think, thankfully, and luckily, I think that there were in the Gacy story, there may have been more than one that got away. There is a lot. You're right. There's a lot of suspicion on that there. And then we talked about in this book that was the inspiration for today's episode, a lot of sort of dark humor along the way. Here's some dark humor from the Colonel world, not to be mistaken with Chubby Gacy there. So Gacy gets busted in 1978, right? The authorities are very much busy digging up his house, crawl space, garden, garage, yard. He put some of the bodies in the river. He had said something sort of sly on the sly to a neighbor or someone that he was thinking about moving because he was running out of room. Meanwhile, he's living alone in this nice house.
Right. But anyway, again, isolation.
He is Well, I don't know that I would say isolation with Gacy. I mean, he stayed in. This guy was the complete opposite of isolation. And with him and Bundy, it was weird that they kind of shared that very outgoing nature and trait, but both of them being politically involved as well, and very much involved with their communities at times. And I had often wondered with Bundy and Gacy, was that all a part of the ruse? But I think it goes back to something you're talking about. Is it some form of split personality? And Gacy almost says that to the police, right? There's 4 Johns: the contractor, the clown, the politician, and the killer. And I think I can agree with that. And I think you're right that it is some kind of split personality, because I don't see Bundy using his involvement in his communities as a way to find and get victims. Right. Or have access to victims. And I don't see that, with the exception of John Gacy, the contractor, the businessman. He doesn't appear to be using those avenues to get victims either. So it must just be their outgoing nature that they have. Anyway, so back to the dark humor here from right. My world. So Gacy gets busted in 1978. The authorities busy digging up his home, figuring out what happened, what number of victims do we have here, who are the victims. It was years before they had identified some of these victims. Some were very quick, some took a long time. So years back, Captain, I knew this older dude from Chicago. He lived there in the later 70s, early 80s. So these folks there were bombarded daily with Gacy news, right? Gacy news, serial killer clown news in their home city, day after day, each and every day. What do you call it? Someone from Chicago, a Chicagoan? Chicago. I like, how about Chi-Towner? That sounds much, or Windy City native. All right. Anyway, so all that's going on in 1978, and they're busy putting together the case against Gacy in 1979. Pink Floyd drops their now incredibly famous album in the middle of all of this. The song Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 is on the radio Friday, November 23rd, 1979, the day after Thanksgiving, 1979. The album is released a week later on November 30th, 1979. And kind of a weird side fact here, did you know they were still recording portions of that album earlier that very month? Wow. Anyway, I'll save that for the Boom Boxes and Bangers podcast. So in some very perverse humor, the Chi-Towners, because of Gacy and all the news that was coming about and that song coming out all sort of at the same time, the Chi-Towners were singing, instead of another brick in the wall, another stiff in the crawl. On the morning of May 9th, 1994, John Wayne Gacy was transferred to Stateville Correctional Center to be executed. They're going to carry out his death sentence. Amen. That afternoon, he was allowed a private picnic on the prison grounds with members of his family. For his last meal, you know, all the killers that we've talked about, this is the only guy that made it to the execution. The other guys died of cancer. Gein died of some kind of complications to cancer. Groves died of hepatitis C and liver failure. Dahmer was killed by another inmate in prison. So Gacy makes it to his execution. For his last meal, he ordered, of course, a bucket of KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, French fries, a dozen fried shrimp, fresh strawberries, and washed it all down with a Diet Coke. That evening, he received the last rites from a Catholic priest before being escorted to the execution chamber. John Wayne Gacy was executed on May 10th, 1994. His final statement to his lawyer before his execution was that killing him would not compensate for the loss of others and that the state was murdering him. His final spoken words were reported to be, "Kiss my ass," although prosecutor William Kunkel later stated, this just recently in 2020, that these words were spoken to a prison official and were not part of any official statement prior to Gacy's execution. John Wayne Gacy was 52 years old when he was executed by the state of Illinois.
Well, Chicago always reminds me of one of my favorite characters, Julius Pepperwood, ex-cop, ex-Marine, and one of the best quotes. I'm from Chicago. Thin crust pizza? No, thank you. I'm from Chicago. Julius Pepperwood.
So, speaking of quotes, this from the book Out of the Mouths of Serial Killers. This is John Wayne Gacy, a John Wayne Gacy quote. This says, "If Jeffrey Dahmer doesn't meet the requirements for insanity, then I'd hate like hell to run into the guy that does."
Very good point.
Well, the guy that did was Ed Gein from the same state, right? Wisconsin's like, nope, Ed Gein, unfit to stand trial. Dahmer, sure. All right, last one for the week.
Trick or
Happy
treat.
Halloween, everybody. Trick or treat, Captain.
Let's
do trick first.
Season. Okay, let's do trick first.
This is a nice Halloween-themed riddle for you.
I have got none of these right so far.
Well, in all fairness, you didn't know you were going to be peppered with riddles during during today's garage appointment. All right, here's the riddle. I have a name, but it isn't mine. You don't think about me while in your prime. People cry when I'm in their sight. Others lie with me all day and night. What am I?
I don't know.
Ed Gein would tell you that's a tombstone, baby. That's a tombstone.
There you go.
All right, treat. Anybody in Chicago knows this. Anybody that's been to Chicago more than once, I would think, would have to know this. Treat. If and when in Chicago, you must go to the Super Dog Drive-In. They have been there since 1948, serving up the best super burgers and shakes, and of course, hot dogs. So go and get you a Chicago dog. And just like my old high school mascot nickname, that's DAWG, dog.
I want to thank everybody for joining us here in the garage. Hope we kept you company during the spooky season. Hope we kept you company if you're running around with your kids doing trick or treat. Colonel, do we have any recommended reading for the beautiful listeners?
Yeah, and if you want to terrify the neighbors, just go out there and you could bark at the moon, like Ozzy Osbourne says, or dance in the moonlight. Yeah, of course, this week, Captain, recommending the Serial Killer Travel Guide Across America, your coast-to-coast tour of terror by Johnny Trevisani with Brian Whitney. This isn't your typical road trip companion. This was the inspiration for this week's episode, so thank you to Johnny and Brian. The Serial Killer Travel Guide Across America is a darkly fascinating guide, an unconventional look that takes readers on a darkly humorous journey through the United States, exploring notorious locations linked to infamous serial killers. And this one, we're going to go 2 books. Let's do 2. And this one works well in tandem with the Serial Killer Travel Guide. It's titled Serial Killer Quote of the Day, 365 Days of Serial Killer Uncut and in Their Own Words, also by Johnny Trevisani. You can find those great titles and many more wonderful recommendations on our recommended page at our website, truecrimegarage.com.
And if you'd like to treat yourself and support the garage at the same time, go to truecrimegarage.com, click on the store page, 2025 Halloween merch. It's only here once. We're not going to sell it next year. It's done very soon. So treat yourself. Don't trick yourself. Just treat yourself. And until next week.
Be good, be kind, and don't live.
Saturday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Saturday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Saturday. Saturday, bring it on.